Chapter 1. The Beginning of the Pipeline. The large bush stood in the moonlight at the meeting place of 3 African countries. The man from the diamond mines had waited under the bush for nearly 2 hours. Suddenly, he heard the noise of a helicopter. He looked up and saw it coming towards him from the east. He waited. When the helicopter was just above the ground, an arm came out. A torch switched on and off, dash, the Morse code for the letter A. The diamond smuggler flashed back B and C, and the helicopter came down safely. After a few moments, its engine was silent. The pilot opened the door and climbed down to the ground. The other man walked across to him. "You're late again," he said. "I had engine problems," said the pilot. "Well, if you've got it, let's have it." The man from the diamond mines reached into his shirt and took out a packet. He gave it to the pilot. The pilot dropped the packet into the pocket of his shirt. "Things are getting difficult at the mines," said the diamond smuggler. "A man has come from London. His name's Silito. The Diamond Corporation has sent him. Some of my men are afraid. One day one of them is going to talk." "Do you want me to tell this to ABC?" asked the pilot. "Yes," said the other man. "They must know about Silito. Our mines are losing more than £2 million a year because of smuggling. The corporation wants the government to stop it, and that means stop me." "What do you want?" asked the pilot. "More money?" "Yes," answered the diamond smuggler. 20% more. "I'll pass the message on to Dakar," said the pilot. "If they're interested, they'll send it on to London. But don't push them too hard. Already 3 men have died in the last 12 months in accidents. 2 were stealing diamonds from the packets. The other man tried to run away." For a moment, the 2 men looked silently at each other in the moonlight. Then the pilot climbed up into the helicopter. "I'll see you in a month," he said. The diamond smuggler watched the helicopter fly away to the east. With it went the diamonds, which would be sold for £100,000. His men had stolen them from the mines during the past month. The diamond smuggler got on his motorcycle and rode off towards Sierra Leone. He rode fast towards the hills, away from the great bush where the pipeline for the richest diamond smuggling operation in the world began. And the end? 5,000 miles away, around the necks of rich women. Chapter 2. James Bond, Secret Agent. Commander James Bond of the British Secret Service picked up the diamond from the desk and held it in front of the desk lamp. He was a tall, handsome man with blue eyes and dark hair. He wore an expensive dark blue suit and a white shirt. Bond looked carefully at the diamond. It was a karat, and its many colors shone brightly in the light. "It's beautiful," Bond said. M, head of the British Secret Service, moved his hand towards a pile of paper packets on the desk in front of him. He opened a packet and pushed it across to Bond. "What you're looking at is the best. A fine blue white," he said. For the next 15 minutes, M showed Bond many different kinds of diamonds. Finally, he sat back in his chair. He looked worried. 90% of all diamond sales happen here in London," he said. "It's big business, £50 million a year. But £2 million worth of diamonds are being smuggled out of Africa every year. We think they're going to America, to American gangs of criminals. Why don't the mining companies stop it? They've tried, but they can't. And the government thinks that the problem is too big for a lot of separate mining companies, said M. There's a big packet of smuggled stones in London at the moment. They're waiting to go to America. Special Branch know the name of the carrier who's going to take them there. They also know who's going to be watching him. Why don't Special Branch or MIS stop them? Asked Bond. Because that won't stop the smuggling, replied M. The carriers never talk, and they probably know nothing important. They get the diamonds from a man here, then hand them to another man when they get to the other side. We need to follow the pipeline to America and see where it goes over there. And the FBI won't be much help to us. It's a very small part of their fight with the big gangs. Have you heard of the House of Diamonds? Yes, said Bond. The big American jewelers. They're on West 46th Street in New York and the Rue de Rivoli in Paris. They've got a small place in London, too, said M, in Hatton Garden. They were once very big buyers at the monthly sales of the Diamond Corporation. Now they're buying less and less. But they're selling more and more. So where are they getting their diamonds? Their main man in London is Rufus B. Saye. What do we know about him? Asked Bond. Not much, said M. He has lunch every day at the American Club in Piccadilly. Doesn't drink or smoke. Lives at the Savoy Hotel. So, what do you want me to do? Asked Bond. M looked at his watch. You have a meeting with Ronnie Valance at Scotland Yard in an hour. He's going to put you into the pipeline in the place of the carrier. And then, said Bond. And then you're going to smuggle those diamonds into America, said M. You're going to be facing the mafia and their American gangs, James, and you'll be on your own. Chapter 3. The House of Diamonds. At 2 o'clock, Bond was looking at 2 photographs in the office of Assistant Commissioner Valance of Scotland Yard. They showed a dark-haired, handsome young man. He's Peter Franks, said Valance. You look a bit like him, similar enough to fool someone who's only got his description. He stupidly talked about this job to a girl in a Soho club. The girl was secretly working for us. She immediately told us about it. Franks had been contacted by a friend of a friend and agreed to do a smuggling job to America for $5,000. My girl asked him if he had the diamonds. He said no, but that his next job was to contact the guard. When? Asked Bond. 5 o'clock tomorrow evening, in her room at the Trafalgar Palace Hotel. A girl called Case. She was going to tell him what to do and go to America with him. Do these smugglers usually go in pairs? Asked Bond. Yes. The person carrying the diamonds is never fully trusted, said Valance. He got up from his desk and started to walk up and down the room. The diamonds certainly come from Africa, probably from Sierra Leone, where our friend Silito is investigating. Then the stones may get out through Liberia or French Guinea, then into France. And because this packet has arrived in London, we think that London is part of the pipeline, too. Valance stopped walking and turned to Bond. We know that this packet is on its way to America, but what happens there, we don't know. How was this $5,000 to be paid to Peter Franks? Who by? We need answers to these questions. You need to get past the man who pays you. You need to go further up the pipeline towards the big men. Okay, said Bond. We're going to get Frank's this evening, said Valance. Then you can make contact with Miss Case. Does she know anything about Frank's? Only his description and his name, said Valance. She probably won't even know the man who contacted him. Everybody does just one job. It's safer that way if something goes wrong. What do you know about the woman? Asked Bond. Age 27, she was born in San Francisco. She's not married. She's been over here 12 times in the last 3 years, maybe more often, using a different name. She always stays at the Trafalgar Palace. The hotel detective says that she doesn't go out much. She never stays more than 2 weeks. You'll need to have a good story about why you're doing this job. Bond thought for a moment. What about this House of Diamonds? I checked on Saye, said Valance. American, age 45, diamond merchant. He goes to Paris a lot, once a month for the last 3 years. He's probably got a girl there. Go and have a look at the place and at him. He picked up one of the phones on his desk. Send up Denkwerts, he said into it, and Lobiniere. Then get me the House of Diamonds on the telephone. Valance walked across to the window and looked out. After a moment, there was a knock at the door. A small man came in. He had a pale face and he was wearing glasses. Good afternoon, Sergeant, said Valance. This is Commander Bond of the Ministry of Defense. I want you to take him to the House of Diamonds in Hatton Garden. He'll be Sergeant James. You'll see Mr. Say, the top man there. You'll say that you think the diamonds from that Ascot robbery are on their way to Argentina through America. You'll ask Say if he's heard anything about them from his New York office. Any questions? No, sir, said Sergeant Dankwerts. A moment later, another man came into the room. He was carrying a small case. Good afternoon, Sergeant Lobiniere, said Valance. Come and look at my friend. The sergeant stood close to Bond and looked very carefully at his face for a minute. Who is he going to be, sir? He asked Valance. Sergeant James, one of Sergeant Dankwert's men. Only for 3 hours, all right? Lobiniere took Bond to a chair by the window and opened his case. For the next 10 minutes, he worked on Bond's face and hair. Bond listened to Valance speak to the House of Diamonds on the telephone. 2 of my men will be calling at 3:30 p.m., Valance was saying. They'll need no more than 10 minutes of Mr. Say's time. Yes. Thank you. Goodbye. Lobiniere held up a pocket mirror in front of Bond. Bond looked into it, and he saw someone who certainly didn't look like James Bond. The waiting room at the House of Diamonds was quiet, except for the sound of a wall clock. There was a thick red carpet on the floor. In the center was a round table and 6 armchairs. Bond guessed that they had cost at least £1,000. Bond and Sergeant Dankwerts sat in armchairs and waited silently. Dankwerts was reading a copy of the Diamond News. Suddenly the door opened and a big, dark man stepped in and looked quickly at each of them. My name is Saye, he said in a cold voice. What do you want? Dankwerts walked round Saye and closed the door behind him. I'm Sergeant Dankwerts of the Special Branch of Scotland Yard, he said calmly. This is Sergeant James. We're looking for information on the theft of some diamonds. You may be able to help us. While Dankwärts told his story, Bond looked carefully at Mr. Say. He was a large man with a square face and short black hair. His lips were a thin, straight line. He wore a black suit, white shirt, and a thin black tie. Bond decided that Saye was a hard, cold-hearted man. And these are the stones we're interested in. Dankwärts was finishing his story. Have any of them come through your company here or in New York? No, they haven't, said Say. He turned and opened the door behind him. Now, good afternoon, gentlemen. And he walked out of the room. Some minutes later, Dankwärts was driving towards Bond's flat near the King's Road. Did you get what you wanted, sir? He asked Bond. I'm not sure exactly what I wanted, said Bond. But I was glad to have a look at Rufus B. Saye. He doesn't look like a diamond merchant. He's not a diamond merchant, sir, said Dankwärts, smiling. I read out a list of missing stones. I mentioned a yellow Premier and 2 Cape Unions. Yes? There are no diamonds with those names, and Saya didn't know that. Chapter 4. Tiffany Case. Bond knocked on the door of room 350 of the Trafalgar Palace Hotel. Come in, said a woman's voice. He walked into the small living room and shut the door behind him. Lock it, said the voice. It came from the bedroom. Bond locked the door and walked across to the middle of the room, past the bedroom door. Sit down, said the voice. Bond smiled and sat in an armchair next to a desk. He could just see her through the open door. She was getting dressed. After a few minutes, Tiffany Case came out of the bedroom. She was very beautiful, with blonde hair and blue eyes. She was dressed in a black suit and a green shirt. She wore an expensive gold watch on her arm and a large diamond ring on the 3rd finger of her right hand. So you're Peter Franks, she said. I'm Tiffany Case. Why did you decide to do this job? They told me that you were a burglar. I am, said Bond. Something went wrong on a job. There was an argument and a person died. And now you want to leave the country, she said. That's right, and I need the money. Where are you going to carry the stones? She asked. Do you have any ideas? I thought perhaps the handles of a suitcase would be a good place, said Bond. Yes? No, because the customs men think the same thing, she said. Do you play golf? After a few minutes, Tiffany Case came out of the bedroom. She was very beautiful, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Yes, said Bond. Which golf balls do you use? She took a piece of paper and a pen from the desk. They're called Dunlop 65s, said Bond. Okay. Have you got a passport? She asked. I have, said Bond, but it uses my real name, James Bond. She looked at him for a moment, then said, It's not important. Now listen. You're going over to America to see a man called Michael Tree. His friends call him Shady Tree. Now this is your story. He's an American friend of yours and you met him in Europe, okay? Okay, said Bond. You'll stay at the Astor Hotel in New York. She walked to the desk and opened a drawer. She took out a small packet and gave it to Bond. There's about 500 pounds in there, she said. Get a room here in London at the Ritz Hotel. Buy a good used suitcase and pack your golfing holiday clothes. Get your golf clubs, then buy a ticket for the Thursday evening Monarch flight to New York. A car will come for you at 6:30 on Thursday evening. The driver will give you the golf balls." "All right," said Bond. "Don't think you can trick us and take the diamonds. The driver will stay with you until your bags go on the plane, and I'll be at London Airport." "What happens in New York?" asked Bond. "Another driver will meet you and tell you what to do next. If anything goes wrong at customs, you know nothing." "Could we meet in New York?" said Bond, smiling. He liked this girl, and she could help him to get further up the pipeline. She looked at him, then looked away. "Well, I suppose we could have dinner Friday night, if the job goes okay. Meet me at 8 o'clock at the 21 Club on 52nd Street. Now I've got things to do." She walked towards the door. Bond followed her. "You'll be all right," she said. "Just stay away from me on the plane." She opened the door, and Bond walked out of the room. "See you at the 21 Club," he said. She closed the door behind him and waited to hear his footsteps go away. 20 minutes later, Tiffany Case walked into Charing Cross Railway Station. She went to one of the telephone boxes and dialed a number. After the usual 2 rings, she heard the click of the automatic recorder taking the call. For 20 seconds, she heard nothing. Then the voice of her boss, who she did not know, said, "Speak." She spoke quickly. "Case to ABC. The carrier's real name is James Bond. He'll use that name on his passport. He plays golf and will carry golf clubs. I suggest we use golf balls. He uses Dunlop 65s. I'll call again later this evening." She put down the phone. In a rented room somewhere in London, the recorder stopped. A door opened and closed. Footsteps went softly down some stairs and out into an unknown street and away. Chapter 5. A Bad Traveler. It was 6 o'clock on Thursday evening. Bond was packing his suitcase in his bedroom at the Ritz. His tickets and passport went into a smaller case which had been prepared for him by Special Branch. There was a narrow, secret space at the back of the case. This held a silencer for his gun and 30 rounds of .25 ammunition. The telephone rang. It was the girl at the hotel desk. She said, "A man from Universal Export has a letter for you, Mr. Bond." A few minutes later, Bond opened the door to a man from headquarters. He gave a large envelope to Bond. "I have to wait and take this back after you read the note inside, sir," he said. Bond sat at the writing desk and began to read. The note was from M. Washington, reports that Rufus B. Say is Jack Spang, a possible gangster. He is twin brother to Serafimo Spang. Together they control the Spangled Mob, a group working in America. The Spang brothers bought the House of Diamonds 5 years ago. They also own the Tiara Hotel in Las Vegas. This hotel is the headquarters of Serafimo Spang. Washington also reports that Spangled Mob buy and sell drugs. This business is looked after by Michael Shady. Tree, a criminal known to the police. The gang has other headquarters in Miami, Detroit, and Chicago. The Spangled Mob is one of the biggest gangs in the United States. If your job takes you into a dangerous meeting with the gang, report at once to headquarters. We will then give the job to the FBI. This is an order." Bond finished reading, then put the note into one of the Ritz envelopes. He gave it to the man from headquarters. After the man had left, Bond walked across to the window and looked out across Green Park. Give the job to the FBI? M would hate to ask the FBI to finish a job. A dangerous meeting would be something for Bond to decide about. He remembered some of his enemies from the past. He was sure that these gangsters could not be as dangerous as them. Or could they? He remembered the hard, cold eyes of Rufus B. Saye. Well, he would have a look at the brother, Serafimo. Bond looked at his watch. 6:25 p.m. He put his right hand under his coat and took out the .25 Beretta automatic gun. He checked the gun carefully, then put it back in the holster under his coat. The telephone rang. "Your car's here, sir," the voice told him. The large black car was standing outside the Ritz Hotel. The driver put Bond's 2 cases and golf clubs in the back of the car. He told Bond to sit in the front passenger seat. As they drove through Piccadilly, he looked at his driver. The man's eyes were hidden behind black sunglasses, and he was cold and professional. After a time, the car stopped at the side of the road. The driver reached under his seat and took out a box of new golf balls. He got out of the car and opened the back door. He opened the pocket on Bond's golf bag. Carefully, he put the 6 new golf balls into the pocket with the old ones already there. Then he climbed back into the front seat and they drove on. At London Airport, Bond's bags went through customs without problems. Tiffany Case came into the departure lounge a few minutes after Bond. There were about 40 other passengers, but there was nobody that Bond recognized except Tiffany Case. He looked round. Were 2 of the passengers watching him? They looked like American businessmen. One of them was a young man with white hair. The other was fat and had a pale face. Bond heard them ask for double brandies at the bar. The fat man took some pills from his pocket and put one into his mouth. Then he drank some brandy. He had a small case with some writing printed on it. It said, "Mr. W. Winter, my blood group is P." A bad traveler, thought Bond. He slept through most of the flight. Chapter 6. Shady Tree. Bond and his bags went through customs easily at New York's Idlewild Airport. A porter took his suitcase and golf clubs and followed him through the airport. Bond was near the exit doors when he heard his name. "Mr. Bond, I have a car for you." Bond turned to see a tall man with a narrow face and mean-looking eyes. They walked outside into the hot early morning sun. Bond saw something square in the man's trouser pocket. It was about the size and shape of a small gun. The car was a black Oldsmobile sedan. Bond climbed into the front seat. He did not wait to be told where to sit. The porter put his suitcase and golf bag in the back. They drove through the traffic to Manhattan. The car stopped in West 46th Street, the Diamond District of New York. They were outside a smart-looking shop with the name House of Diamonds above the door. Bond took his small case and reached for the golf clubs. "I'll take those," said the driver. "You take the suitcase." Bond followed the driver to a small door at the side of the shop. Inside was a man in a porter's room. "Can we leave the bags with you?" the driver asked him. "Sure," said the man. "They'll be okay here." The driver waited for Bond to get into the lift. The driver carried the golf bag over his shoulder, and they went up to the 4th floor in silence. The driver knocked on a door opposite the lift and opened it. Bond followed him inside. A man with bright red hair and a big moon-shaped face was sitting at a desk. He stood up as they came in. He was a hunchback. He walked slowly round Bond, then stood in front of him and looked up into his face. Bond looked calmly back at the hunchback, seeing the big ears, the half-open mouth, and the short, strong arms. The hunchback's voice was sharp and high. "London tells me that you have killed a man, Mr. Bond. I believe them. Would you like to do more work for us?" "Perhaps," answered Bond. "How much do you pay?" The hunchback laughed, then turned to the driver. "Rocky, get those balls out of the bag and cut them open." He quickly shook his arm, and a knife appeared from the arm of his coat and dropped into his hand. "A throwing knife," thought Bond, "and he's fast." The hunchback sat down behind his desk again. Rocky took the knife and put the 6 new golf balls on the desk. He cut one of them open and put it on the desk. The hunchback took out 3 uncut diamonds. The driver went on with his work until Bond had counted 18 stones on the desk. If the stones were good quality, they could be sold for about £100,000 after cutting. "Okay, Rocky," said the hunchback. "Take the golf clubs and this man's bags to the Astor Hotel. He's staying there. Send them up to his room." After the driver had left, Bond sat in a chair opposite the hunchback. He lit a cigarette. "Now, if you are happy, I'd like my $5,000, Bond said. The hunchback slowly moved the diamonds in front of him into a circle. He looked up at Bond. "You will be paid," he said. "And you may get more than $5,000, but you'll get the money yourself because it's safer. It is very dangerous for a man to suddenly have a lot of money. He talks about it and spends it without being careful. Then the police catch him and ask him where it all came from. He hasn't got an answer, right?" "Okay," said Bond. "How do I get the $5,000? "I'll tell you a story," said the hunchback. "Today you met your friend, Mr. Tree, that's me. You knew me in England in 1945, just after the war. Okay?" "Okay," said Bond. "I owed you money for a card game that we had at the Savoy Hotel in London, right? When we met today, I paid you, so now you have $1,000. Here's the money." The hunchback took 10 $100 notes from his pocket and pushed them across the desk. Bond put them in his coat pocket. "You decide to go and see some horse racing in Saratoga," continued the hunchback. "You put a bet on a horse and win another $4,000. Now you have $5,000. Now if anybody asks, where did it come from, you have answers." "Maybe the horse will lose the race," said Bond. "It won't." The hunchback smiled. "Good," said Bond. "I'd like to stay away from England for a while. Do you need any extra help?" The hunchback looked silently at Bond. "Maybe," he said after a few moments. "Phone me after the race. This is my number. Write it down. Wisconsin 73697. And write this down, too. 4th race on Tuesday. The Perpetuity Stakes. Put your bet on Shy Smile to win. He's a big horse with a white face and white feet." Chapter 7. Felix Leiter. Bond went down in the lift and out into the street. He walked towards Times Square. After a few minutes, Bond became sure that someone was following him. He looked back, but there was nobody suddenly moving into a shop. Nobody quickly putting up a newspaper to hide their face. Bond turned right into the Avenue of Americas and stopped inside the entrance of the first shop he saw. Suddenly, he felt something hard holding his right arm, and a voice said, "Relax, Mr. Bond. Don't move, or you'll have bullets for lunch." He felt something hard push into his side. Had he heard this voice before? He looked down to see a metal hook holding his right arm. Moving fast, Bond tried to hit the man behind him. But the man caught his arm and stopped him. Then came a laugh and a voice said, "Sorry, James, you're caught." Bond turned to see the smiling face of Felix Leiter. "You were in front of me," said Bond. He smiled back at the American secret agent. The last time Bond had seen him, Felix had been lying on a bed in a pool of blood in a Florida hotel. "What are you doing here?" said Bond. "Come on, you can buy me lunch and tell me." "Okay," said Leiter. He put his metal hook into the right-hand pocket of his coat and took Bond's arm with his left hand. "Let's go to Sardi's. It's across the street." They went upstairs in the famous actors and writers restaurant. Leiter walked slowly and with some difficulty. Bond saw that his right arm and left leg were false, and there were small marks above his right eye. Suddenly he felt something hard holding his right arm. The waiter came and Leiter ordered a dry martini for Bond. Bond smiled. Leiter had remembered his favorite drink. Leiter's smile was warm, but his eyes were watching Bond carefully. "Tell me, what's your business with Shady Tree?" Bond drank his martini and lit a cigarette. "You tell me something first, Felix," he said. "Are you still working for the CIA?" "No," said Leiter. "When I lost my gun hand, they could only give me desk work. So I work for Pinkerton's detective agency now. I'm a private detective. I investigate drugs and fixed horse races where they know who's going to win, and I organize men to watch the racehorses in their stables at night. What about you? Are you still with the same people?" "That's right," said Bond. "On a job for them now?" "Yes." "In secret?" "Yes." Leiter looked unhappy. "If it's about the Spangled Gang, you're crazy to be working alone. This is dangerous, but maybe we can help each other. I'll tell you why I was near Shady Tree's offices." "I think I know," said Bond. "You're interested in someone with a white face and 4 white feet. He's called Shy Smile." "That's right," said Leiter. "He's racing at Saratoga on Tuesday." "I'm going to bet $1,000 on him, and he's going to win," said Bond. "It's my pay for another job. I brought a big packet of uncut diamonds in by plane this morning, for Mr. Spang and his friends. Why are you interested in the horse?" "Because the horse that looks like Shy Smile is really a fast horse called Pick-a-Pepper. The real Shy Smile was a slow horse and didn't win races. They shot him." "Don't tell me," said Bond. "Pick-a-Pepper's also got a white face and 4 white feet." "Right," said Leiter. "And they've done a good job with any other small differences. They started planning this more than a year ago. They're going to make a lot of money. It's a very big race." "What are you going to do about it?" asked Bond. "I don't know. I need to think about it," said Leiter. "Let's drive to Saratoga together on Sunday. We can both stay at a quiet place I know, the Sagamore Motel, and meet in the evenings." "Good idea," said Bond. "Now let's order some lunch and I'll tell you my story." He finished the story when they were drinking coffee. "And we think that the Spangs are smuggling the diamonds and that the House of Diamonds is selling them." "I don't know much about Jack Spang," said Leiter, "but I've heard about Tiffany Case. Her mother owned a cheap hotel in San Francisco. One day she decided not to pay money to the local gangsters. Some nights later they arrived and broke doors, furniture, and everything else in the place. Then they attacked Tiffany. It was bad. She was only 16 years old." "That's terrible," said Bond angrily. "Next day, she ran away. She had several jobs, dancer, waitress, until she was about 20. Then she moved to Florida and started drinking too much alcohol. One day, a boy fell into the sea and Tiffany jumped in and saved him. Her name was in the newspapers. Some rich woman gave her somewhere to live and helped her to stop drinking. She took Tiffany around the world, but Tiffany left her when they got to San Francisco. She went to live with her mother for a short time, then moved down to Reno. She met Serafimo there, and he gave her a job at the Tiara Casino in Las Vegas. She's been there for the last year or two. She goes to Europe in between, I suppose." "I like her," said Bond. He looked at his watch. "I need some sleep. I'm staying at the Astor Hotel. Where shall we meet on Sunday morning?" "Outside the Plaza Hotel at 9 o'clock, said Leiter. "You've got a dangerous job, James. Be careful. All American gangsters are bad, but these Spangled boys are some of the worst."